You've survived so much. Don't quit now. You shouldn't even be here. And yet you are. You've been through storms others never even saw. You've cried in silence, buried memories, and walked alone when no one noticed you were missing. But still, you're here. And that means something. So before you close your heart, before you stop believing that your breath still matters, listen. Because this might be the whisper you've waited your whole life to hear. You didn't just survive the storm, you walked through hurricanes that would have drowned lesser souls, treading water when everyone else had boats. You stumbled through deserts of abandonment where hope evaporated with each footstep, and still, somehow, found an oasis. Heaven has been watching. The same eyes that counted every hair on your head have counted every tear on your pillow. The God who watched over Job's suffering has stood sentinel over yours, collecting each moment of your perseverance like precious jewels. Pause here. Have you ever considered that your very presence here is a miracle? Against all probabilities, despite all wounds, you still breathe. Is this mere chance, or is there purpose woven into your survival? Chapter 1, The Quiet Battles. You face the kind of battles that leave no medals, no applause, no witnesses. Loss that felt like your body forgot how to breathe. Loneliness that didn't echo, it just swallowed. You didn't write your story in bold headlines. You survived it in tiny, fragile steps. You sat in waiting rooms hoping for a miracle that never came. You made coffee for people who never thanked you. You watched the phone not ring. And still you rose. You've fallen like a giant, only to rise again with the patience of an ant. You've held smiles like heavy weights while your heart was cracking like fine china beneath your ribs. You've written tomorrow on your wrist when every voice inside you whispered, never. Divine wisdom, personified in scripture as Sophia, whispers, those who endure in suffering are like stars in the firmament. They shine brightest in the darkest night. While humans busied themselves with noise, heaven leaned in to hear the quiet rhythm of your faithful heart. Pause here. When was the last time you honored your own resilience? The invisible battles often require more courage than the visible ones. Your silent victories may have no trophies, but they've built muscles of character that no gymnasium could produce. Imagine that. Spiritual six-pack abs from crying. Chapter 2. The disguised strength. They told you strength was loud, that it looked like power, ambition, or success. But yours was different. It looked like standing when you had every reason to fall. It looked like folding the same laundry, saying the same prayer, and showing up anyway. Strength was you staying. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. Yours was the strength of water, not the dramatic crash of waves against cliffs, but the patient persistence that over time carves canyons from stone. Yours was the strength of roots, unseen, uncelebrated, but holding entire lives together when winds came to test what would stand. Ruth's devotion to Naomi, from the biblical book of Ruth, where Ruth, a young widow, refused to abandon her widowed mother-in-law, promising, "Where you go, I will go," echoes in your steadfastness. When heaven watched your quiet commitment, angels paused their songs to witness a different kind of glory, not the triumph of conquest, but the majesty of endurance. Pause here. Consider how the mighty oak appears in winter, bare, vulnerable, seemingly defeated. Yet beneath the surface, it is gathering strength for a spring no one can see coming. What spring might be gathering within you even now? Chapter 3. Survival was the message. So what if you didn't win the world's race? What if surviving was the message, a living testimony that a soul can break and still shine? That even when no one clapped, heaven watched. You didn't just make it through the fire, you carried something sacred through it. What if your broken pieces weren't meant for the trash, but for a mosaic that could catch the light in ways perfection never could? What if your scars were meant to be maps for someone else's journey home? Like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, those three young Hebrews from the book of Daniel who refused to bow to an idol and were thrown into flames, you were never alone in your flames. The fourth figure walked beside you, though you may not have seen him. And just as their hair was not singed and their clothes did not smell of smoke, there are parts of your spirit the fire was never permitted to touch. Pause here. Fire transforms everything it touches. Gold becomes purer, clay becomes stronger. What has the fire made of you that could never have been formed in comfort? Chapter 4. The whisper of giving up. But let's be honest, you've heard it lately, haven't you? That voice in the quiet. It doesn't matter anymore. Nobody sees. Just give up quietly. That whisper sounds almost reasonable. It doesn't scream, it just sighs. And that's how quitting hides behind fatigue. That voice sounds like reason dressed in exhaustion. It comes not as a roaring lion, but as a sighing friend. It wraps surrender in the language of self-care and calls retreat a form of wisdom. It's the voice that visited Elijah under the broom tree and whispered to him that his journey had gone far enough. But just as an angel touched Elijah with food and rest before the 40-day journey, heaven sends provision now, perhaps through these very words finding you. The God who spoke to Elijah in the gentle whisper after wind, earthquake, and fire still specializes in the soft voice that comes when all dramatic hope has fled. Pause here. Fatigue and truth often speak in similar tones. Have you ever noticed how the impulse to surrender comes not in your weakest moment, but just before breakthrough? Like childbirth's transition phase, the darkest pain often precedes new life. Chapter 5. God waited too. But what if you're not late? What if you're right on time? If God waited for Enoch for 300 years of walking, He can wait for you. Enoch didn't run. He walked, not loudly, not famously, just faithfully. And then he disappeared, not in failure, but in divine embrace. You don't have to be impressive to be beloved. You just have to walk. What if the timeline you've been measuring yourself against was never the divine calendar at all? What if, like Moses spending 40 years in the wilderness before his ministry began, your wasted time has been sacred preparation all along? Heaven's patience is its most underrated attribute. The same God who let Abraham and Sarah wait until laughter seemed impossible, who let Joseph dream in a prison cell for years, who allowed David to write psalms in caves before sitting on a throne, this God understands the sacred geometry of waiting. In God's eyes, Enoch's 300 years of ordinary faithfulness outshone centuries of others' noisy achievements. Pause here. Time passes differently in the economy of heaven. 60 years can be a breath, and a moment can be eternity. What would change if you believed that you were neither behind nor ahead, but precisely where the divine appointment book has you scheduled. Chapter 6. Now is the time to begin again. So, begin again, not with fireworks or perfection, but with one small breath that says, I'm still here. That's all heaven needs. That's all someone else needs. Begin by believing this life can still bloom. Begin by forgiving the day that disappointed you. Begin by lighting a candle, even if no one's watching, because your beginning is not behind you, it's waiting now. Begin again like the widow who placed 2 copper coins in the treasury, not with abundance, but with everything you have. Begin again like Peter, who denied Christ 3 times, but still ran to the empty tomb. Begin again like the prodigal who practiced his speech all the way home, only to find his words swallowed by his father's embrace. Job's latter days were greater than his former, not because suffering was erased, but because it was redeemed. The God who restores years, the locusts have eaten watches your smallest beginnings with anticipation. When you strike your small match of faith, angels lean in to catch the light. Pause here. Seeds don't require fanfare to split open in the dark. They simply respond to their design. What small action could you take today that honors the divine design within you? Something so simple it almost seems insignificant, yet contains the DNA of everything you're meant to become. Chapter 7. You're still here, and that means everything. You've survived so much, not so you could disappear quietly, but so you could speak with quiet power. You're still here, and that means something, maybe everything. So don't quit now. You've outlived predictions, outlasted prognoses, outprayed demons that swore you wouldn't make it to this day. You've been the last one standing when everyone else took easier paths. You've been the ember that refused to cool when the wind insisted. Like Moses, who stood on Mount Nebo, viewing the promised land he wouldn't enter in his lifetime, your journey may culminate in ways you cannot yet see. But the God who buried Moses personally, the only human whose grave was dug by divine hands, sees the full arc of your story. And what looks like an ending to you may be, in heaven's perspective, merely the pivot point of legacy. Pause here. Finally, your presence on this planet is not random chance or cosmic accident. It is sacred intention. Your breath is not just air moving through lungs, it is possibility taking shape. What will you do with this extraordinary gift of continued existence? How will you honor the miracle that is your survival? If this message touched your heart, please subscribe and like. Your support helps us reach others who might need these words too. Thank you for listening, and remember, don't quit now.